How communication stopped human extinction. Imagine if humans had gone extinct 70,000 years ago. According to genetic evidence, we nearly did. Our species was reduced to fewer than 10,000 individuals. A volcanic winter had darkened skies worldwide, decimating food sources. We've recovered from the brink multiple times because of our unique gift, explains Dr. Elena Cortez, paleoanthropologist. Yet here we are today, 8 billion strong. What saved us? Our extraordinary ability to communicate complex ideas proved far more powerful than brute strength or natural adaptation. This documentary explores how information-sharing technologies repeatedly rescued humanity when all seemed lost, revealing the surprising survival strategy that defined our species. The brink of extinction. Imagine if humanity had simply vanished. No cities, no technology, no history books recording our existence. Just gone. The evidence suggests we came frighteningly close to this reality once before. Around 70,000 years ago, our species faced a catastrophic population collapse. Genetic studies of modern humans reveal a striking pattern. A severe bottleneck where our global population plummeted to fewer than 10,000 individuals worldwide. This sudden, dramatic crash left its imprint in our DNA. Today, humans show remarkably low genetic diversity compared to other primates, a genetic signature still visible, an echo from this near-extinction event. The timing of this population collapse aligns precisely with one of Earth's most devastating natural disasters, the Toba supervolcano eruption in present-day Indonesia. When Toba erupted, it ejected an estimated 2,800 cubic kilometers of material into the atmosphere, enough to cover the entire state of California in a layer 5 feet deep. For comparison, the 1980 Mount St. Helens eruption ejected just 1 cubic kilometer. The environmental consequences were apocalyptic. Volcanic ash circled the globe, blocking sunlight and triggering a volcanic winter. Average global temperatures plummeted by as much as 15 degrees Celsius in some regions, with these harsh conditions persisting for years, potentially a decade or more, as evidenced by ice cores and deep-sea sediments. For early humans, this sudden climate shift devastated entire ecosystems. Plant life withered under darkened skies across continents. Herbivores died off rapidly as vegetation disappeared, followed by the predators that hunted them. The entire food chain collapsed with frightening speed, leaving our ancestors, who possessed no specialized adaptations for such catastrophic conditions, in an increasingly hostile world without stockpiles, preserved food, or advanced shelter systems. Human groups scattered across Africa and parts of Asia faced this global catastrophe in isolation, separated by vast distances and natural barriers. Archaeological evidence from this period, though sparse, tells a grim story of abandoned sites and layers devoid of human activity, silent testimony to populations that simply disappeared. Computer modeling of this scenario reveals that without some intervening factor, the probability of complete human extinction during this period exceeded 70%. A sobering thought. Our species was more likely to vanish than survive. Yet somehow, against overwhelming odds, a fraction of humanity endured. The distinguishing factor wasn't superior physical strength, better territory, or technological superiority as we might conceive it today. The archaeological record provides compelling clues about what made survival possible. Sites associated with surviving human groups show distinctive patterns of resource exploitation. These populations targeted specific foods that remained available during the crisis: shellfish along coastlines, certain tubers that could survive with minimal sunlight, small animals with rapid reproduction cycles. This strategic adaptation reflected critical knowledge sharing rather than random foraging. The artifacts these groups left behind prove even more revealing. We see an increase in symbolic objects, ochre pigments, shell beads, carved items that archaeologists interpret as evidence of more complex communication systems. These physical remnants demonstrate increasingly sophisticated information exchange developing precisely when it was most needed. The groups that survived possessed something more fundamental than physical advantages: effective communication. They shared critical information about shifting food sources as traditional prey animals disappeared. They transmitted techniques for finding and processing unfamiliar foods. They coordinated hunting and gathering activities across larger areas to maximize increasingly scarce resources. Crucially, they preserved and passed down vital survival information between generations. When seasonal food sources were discovered, that knowledge persisted beyond the discoverer's lifetime. When new preservation techniques developed, they spread throughout the group rather than dying with their inventor. This communication advantage created a powerful feedback loop. Groups with better information sharing survived at higher rates, increasing evolutionary pressure for enhanced communication capabilities. Modern brain scans reveal that language processing activates multiple specialized regions simultaneously, neural architecture that evolved specifically to handle complex communicative demands. This evidence reframes our understanding of human evolution. During this near-extinction event, our most valuable adaptation wasn't physical but cognitive: our ability to exchange complex information. The Toba Catastrophe selected for humans who could communicate effectively, not those who were merely stronger or faster. The implications transform how we understand human development. Language wasn't simply a convenient tool. It was the technology that prevented our extinction. Before writing, agriculture, metallurgy, or any physical technology, the development of complex verbal communication saved our species. The few thousand individuals who survived this bottleneck carried something precious forward: not just genes, but communication systems. These systems continued to evolve, eventually developing into the diverse languages spoken worldwide today. Every word we speak echoes this ancient survival mechanism, this first extinction-preventing technology. When examining human development after this bottleneck period, we see an acceleration in cultural complexity. Cave paintings appear. More sophisticated tools emerge. Trading networks expand. All these developments built upon the foundation of complex language that became essential during the crisis period, when words saved us. While the Toba Catastrophe devastated human populations, it created the perfect conditions for language to evolve from basic signals into something far more powerful. The groups that survived created living libraries of survival knowledge that could outlast any individual lifetime. The climate fluctuations following that bottleneck period were persistent and severe. For tens of thousands of years, early humans faced wildly unstable conditions. Ice cores from Greenland reveal temperature swings of up to 10 degrees Celsius occurring within a single human generation. Picture a community that had mastered hunting techniques for cold weather game suddenly facing barren landscapes as familiar ecosystems transformed almost overnight. This environmental volatility created unprecedented selective pressure. Animals with specialized adaptations often perished when their environmental niche disappeared. A cheetah's speed becomes useless when its prey species vanishes. A polar bear's thick fur becomes a liability in warming conditions. Humans, however, possessed something different: a communication system that could rapidly adapt, like a flexible lifeboat navigating through storms of environmental chaos. Recent excavations at Blombos Cave in South Africa uncovered ochre pieces with deliberate engravings dating back 73,000 years. These markings represent early symbolic communication systems, perhaps records of seasonal migration patterns or resource locations that helped communities survive lean seasons. Similar findings across Africa show these were part of a widespread cognitive shift toward abstract representation. Language enabled something revolutionary: the ability to reference objects and events not immediately present. This displacement feature allowed early humans to sit around evening fires describing distant water sources or approaching weather patterns. While a wolf might howl to signal immediate danger, humans could point to the horizon and explain, "The herds will return when the moon is full," giving their group time to prepare and positioning them precisely where resources would appear. The physiological changes supporting speech reveal nature's investment in communication. The human larynx sits remarkably low in the throat compared to other primates, a position that increases choking risk during eating but dramatically expands our range of vowel sounds. This anatomical trade-off appears in fossil records from approximately 100,000 years ago, suggesting our ancestors accepted increased mortality risk for better speech capabilities. The hyoid bone, which anchors the tongue muscles essential for articulation, also evolved specifically to support complex vocalization. Our neural architecture tells an equally compelling story. Modern brain imaging reveals that language processing engages a distributed network spanning both hemispheres: Broca's area for production, Wernicke's area for comprehension, and numerous supporting regions for syntax, word retrieval, and contextual understanding. This neural investment represents massive biological resources devoted specifically to communication. What makes this biological investment extraordinary is that it solved a uniquely human problem. Most animals inherit their survival strategies through genetics. A spider spins its perfect web on the first attempt. A salmon navigates to its birthplace without a map. Humans, however, rely overwhelmingly on learned behaviors rather than innate ones. This created both vulnerability and opportunity. When environments changed dramatically, instinct-driven species often faced extinction if their hardwired behaviors no longer matched their surroundings. Humans, with fewer instincts but greater learning capacity, could rapidly develop new survival strategies, provided that information could be effectively preserved and transmitted across generations. Archaeological evidence supports this survival advantage. Human groups with more complex symbolic artifacts consistently expanded their territories while others disappeared. Sites in Europe show Cro-Magnon populations, with sophisticated symbolic objects, gradually replacing Neanderthal groups, with fewer symbolic artifacts, even though Neanderthals had existed successfully for hundreds of thousands of years prior. The cave paintings at Lascaux, Chauvet, and Altamira provide vivid evidence of sophisticated information transmission. These contained detailed zoological information about animal behaviors and seasonal patterns. The paintings frequently depict animals in positions revealing vulnerabilities, a bison turning its head to expose its neck, or deer crossing at specific river points, effectively creating hunting manuals for future generations. The handprints that often accompany these paintings tell an especially poignant story. Researchers from Cambridge University demonstrated that many belong to adolescents, suggesting they represent educational transmission, like a prehistoric classroom where adults guided younger hands to imprint knowledge that would sustain their community. As language capabilities expanded, humans developed categorization systems. Early language contained sophisticated classifications for plants, animals, and environmental features. This allowed knowledge transfer. Knowing that one red berry was poisonous might save lives when encountering similar plants in new territories. This capacity for abstraction created cumulative knowledge. Other animals might learn over their lifetime, but each generation largely starts anew. Humans could inherit the discoveries of countless ancestors, building upon rather than repeating them, turning individual experience into collective wisdom. Anthropological studies of modern hunter-gatherer groups demonstrate this transmitted knowledge in action. The average adult in these societies can identify hundreds of plant species with their properties and uses. They maintain mental maps covering thousands of square kilometers. They predict animal behavior patterns across yearly cycles. This knowledge isn't genetically inherited. It's transmitted through stories, songs, and direct instruction. The survival value becomes clear during environmental challenges. When faced with unusual weather, Hunter-gatherer groups access collective memories of similar events from previous generations and implement tested strategies. When entering new territories, they apply categorical knowledge to make educated predictions about which plants might be edible or which water sources might be reliable. This linguistic heritage wasn't perfect. Without writing, information degraded over generations. Crucial knowledge could be lost if too many elders died simultaneously. But it provided something unprecedented: resilience through collective memory and adaptability through shared experience. A distributed cognitive system that could track environmental patterns across centuries, preserving life-saving information long beyond any single human lifespan. The warning network. Option 3 offers the perfect foundation for opening this section. When disaster strikes without warning, the difference between survival and extinction often comes down to minutes of advanced notice. The archaeological record presents us with a puzzling pattern. Civilizations with nearly identical technology, resources, and infrastructure facing the same catastrophic events experienced dramatically different outcomes. Some collapsed entirely, while others absorbed the blow and continued to thrive. The critical difference? Advanced warning through sophisticated communication networks. Consider what happened when the massive Lisbon earthquake and tsunami struck in 1755. In coastal communities without warning systems, entire towns vanished. Buildings crumbled, streets flooded, with few survivors to rebuild. Yet historical records show that in areas where watchmen on hills could signal approaching tsunami waves with fire or horns, mortality rates dropped by as much as 70%. Those precious minutes allowed people to reach higher ground, transforming potential extinction into survivable disaster. The Polynesian islanders developed this advantage to remarkable sophistication. Scattered across the vast Pacific Ocean, they created history's most extensive pre-industrial warning system. Using specialized canoes and a relay network of island observers, they transmitted tsunami warnings across thousands of miles. Archaeological evidence from Hawaii and Tonga reveals their settlements were strategically positioned with tsunami risk in mind. Primary villages occupied elevated terrain, while lookout stations on shorelines showed evidence of rapid, organized abandonment, not the chaotic debris patterns typical of unexpected disaster. This system emerged through generations of careful observation and communication development. In ancient China, an equally innovative early warning technology emerged. During the Han Dynasty, seismologists developed bronze vessels called earthquake weathercocks that detected primary earthquake waves, the compression waves that travel faster than the devastating secondary waves. These vessels contained delicate pendulums that would sway and trigger dragons mounted on the rim to drop bronze balls when primary waves arrived, giving communities crucial minutes to evacuate before destructive waves followed. Historical records from 132 CE document how these devices saved thousands in the Gansu region when the warning enabled complete evacuation before buildings collapsed. The technology spread throughout East Asia, with variations appearing in Korea and Japan. The knowledge behind these devices passed through generations of imperial seismologists, creating an enduring chain of disaster response expertise. Indigenous Australian communities developed what may be the most durable disaster warning system in human history. Their songlines, intricate oral mapping systems embedded within creation stories, contained precise information about tsunami evacuation routes, wildfire safe zones, and elevated areas for flood retreat. These were detailed response protocols transmitted through elaborate performances, ensuring perfect memorization. Europeans initially dismissed these songlines as primitive mythology when they encountered Aboriginal communities in the 1800s. Yet anthropological research reveals these information systems preserved accurate records of coastline changes from sea level rises occurring 7,000 years earlier. This communication durability meant warnings about rare catastrophic events could persist across hundreds of generations, preparing communities for disasters occurring only once every few centuries. These communication systems transformed the nature of disasters. For communities without warnings, tsunamis, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions were random extinction events, unpredictable forces eliminating entire populations. For communities with established networks, these same events became manageable risks with defined response protocols. The contrast becomes evident when examining civilizations facing identical threats. When Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 CE, Pompeii and Herculaneum were destroyed with minimal survivors. Yet archaeological evidence shows numerous smaller settlements in the region had been evacuated before pyroclastic flows arrived. The difference was connection to warning networks, messengers who observed initial eruption phases and spread alerts along established routes. This pattern continues throughout history. The Minoan civilization developed a sophisticated fire signaling system across Crete after the Thera eruption, allowing them to survive subsequent volcanic events that devastated unconnected settlements. In the Andes, Incan messenger networks transmitted information about tsunamis, earthquakes, or volcanic eruptions across hundreds of miles in a single day, giving inland communities time to prepare relief supplies and shelter for coastal refugees. The advantage provided by these systems extended beyond immediate survival to long-term resilience. When the massive tsunami generated by the 1700 Cascadia earthquake struck the Pacific Northwest, indigenous communities with established warning systems evacuated in time and had predetermined rally points where survivors gathered afterward, preserving social structure and enabling rapid recovery. Communities without such systems often disintegrated, with survivors scattering and cultural knowledge lost. These warning networks represent a critical evolutionary adaptation that selected strongly for human groups investing in communication infrastructure. Communities allocating resources toward watchmen, messenger systems, and signal technologies gained extraordinary advantages when disasters struck, allowing them to survive events that eliminated less connected groups. Modern archaeological techniques have revealed the widespread nature of these ancient warning systems. Ground-penetrating radar has identified networks of signal towers across the Mediterranean, positioned to relay fire signals at speeds approaching 200 miles per hour. Linguistic analysis of indigenous languages reveals rich vocabularies for describing environmental warning. Signs, with some Amazon basin languages containing over 30 specific terms for different cloud formations preceding severe weather. The archaeological record clearly demonstrates that civilizations with developed warning systems consistently outlived their unconnected neighbors when facing identical threats, the outcome of deliberate investments in communication infrastructure that prioritized rapid information transfer during emergencies. The medicine of words. While warning systems saved communities from immediate physical disasters, humanity faced a more insidious threat that moved silently from person to person. Long before we understood the invisible world of pathogens, diseases repeatedly brought our species to the brink of extinction. The true mystery isn't that these microscopic killers existed, but how humanity survived them without understanding what we were fighting. Throughout recorded history, infectious diseases have claimed more human lives than wars, famines, and natural disasters combined. The Justinian plague of the 6th century killed an estimated 25 million people, nearly half the population of Europe at that time. The Black Death in the 14th century eliminated approximately one-third of Europe's population in just 5 years. The 1918 influenza pandemic infected a third of the world's population and killed between 50 to 100 million people. These were existential threats to human civilization. What's remarkable is that humanity faced these catastrophic pandemics without understanding the basic mechanisms of disease. The germ theory of disease wasn't established until the late 19th century. For thousands of years before that, humans fought deadly invisible enemies without knowing what they were or how they spread. Most societies attributed disease to supernatural causes, divine punishment, miasmas of bad air, or imbalanced humors within the body. By all logical measures, this ignorance should have left us defenseless. Yet archaeological and historical evidence reveals something fascinating. Societies with developed information-sharing systems consistently survived disease outbreaks with significantly lower mortality rates. The difference wasn't superior medical treatments. It was superior communication about effective preventative measures, even when the underlying science remained mysterious. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, dating to approximately 1600 BCE in ancient Egypt, contains detailed descriptions of 48 medical cases, including infections. Ancient Egyptian physicians carefully recorded symptoms, treatments, and outcomes, creating a medical database spanning generations. The papyrus took an empirical approach. Treatments were recorded with notes on effectiveness, creating an evidence-based medical tradition nearly 3,500 years ago. In medieval Europe during the Black Death, the consequences of information access became starkly apparent. Cities like Venice established sophisticated quarantine protocols based on written accounts of previous plagues. Venetian officials required ships to anchor offshore for 40 days before entering the harbor, a practice not based on understanding bacterial transmission, but on careful observation of disease patterns. Families waited anxiously on shore, watching for signs that disease had erupted aboard the quarantined vessels. When ships passed this waiting period without illness emerging, their reunions were marked by both joy and relief, having narrowly avoided what could have destroyed entire family lines. This system saved countless lives despite complete ignorance about Yersinia pestis, the actual bacterium causing the plague. Communities without such information systems faced devastating consequences. In isolated villages across Europe, where quarantine knowledge hadn't reached, death came swiftly and mercilessly. Entire communities were abandoned as the dying had no one left to care for them. Children became orphans in a single week, left to care for younger siblings while surrounded by death. Indigenous knowledge systems around the world developed sophisticated medical communication networks that proved equally vital. The Calueya healers of Bolivia maintained an oral medical tradition spanning over 1,000 years, preserving information about more than 900 medicinal plants. Their specialized medical language encoded pharmaceutical knowledge with such precision that modern researchers have validated the efficacy of many traditional treatments. When epidemics swept through South American communities, those with access to Calueya knowledge often survived while neighboring villages were decimated. Perhaps the most powerful testament to the life-saving potential of medical communication comes from the history of variolation, an early form of smallpox prevention. This technique originated in China and India thousands of years ago, involving deliberate infection with a mild form of smallpox to prevent severe disease. Knowledge of the procedure spread through written medical texts across Asia, eventually reaching the Ottoman Empire and then Europe in the early 18th century. The human drama behind this knowledge transfer is remarkable. Lady Mary Wortley Montagu, after losing her brother to smallpox and suffering disfigurement from the disease herself, observed variolation in Constantinople in 1717. Despite ridicule from the European medical establishment, she passionately advocated for the technique, even using it on her own children. Her writings initiated a communication chain that eventually led to Edward Jenner's development of the smallpox vaccine in 1796. Before Jenner's innovation, variolation had already reduced smallpox mortality from approximately 30% to less than 2%, saving millions despite complete ignorance about viruses or immunology. The survival advantage provided by medical communication became dramatically apparent during colonial encounters. European colonizers who dismissed indigenous medical knowledge often suffered terribly in unfamiliar environments. Captain James Cook's expeditions maintained remarkably low mortality rates partly because his crew adopted anti-scorbutic practices learned from Pacific Islander medical traditions. Sailors who consumed vitamin C-rich foods, as advised by indigenous healers, avoided the agonizing deaths from scurvy that had claimed countless other European sailors. What emerges from this historical pattern is clear. Written medical knowledge saved more lives than any specific medicine for most of human history. While individual treatments might have limited efficacy, The systematic preservation and dissemination of medical observations created a cumulative knowledge base that transformed lethal pandemics into survivable challenges. Communication networks turned isolated tragedies into opportunities for collective learning, allowing each devastating outbreak to inform responses to future life-saving protocols through generations. Another form of writing was quietly reshaping humanity's survival prospects. Those simple marks on clay tablets about grain storage and water distribution accomplished something that weapons, discoveries, and even medicine couldn't. They broke the cycle of population collapse that had kept humanity in check for millennia. For roughly 5,000 years after the agricultural revolution, human population grew at a painfully slow rate. Archaeological evidence from sites across Mesopotamia, Egypt, and China reveals a striking pattern. Settlements would grow, sometimes flourishing for generations, before suddenly collapsing. This boom-and-bust cycle kept humanity's total numbers remarkably stable despite our technological innovations. A settlement might thrive for decades only to vanish entirely, leaving behind skeletal remains showing signs of malnutrition and violence. What changed around 3000 BCE wasn't our biology or even our basic technologies. It was our information management capability. In multiple regions across the globe, humans developed systems to record quantities, transactions, and obligations. The timing emerged as human settlements reached critical complexity thresholds where memory alone could no longer track essential resources, like an ancient version of today's data storage systems when information overload occurs. The Uruk tablets from ancient Mesopotamia tell a revealing story. Dating to approximately 3300 BCE, these earliest writing specimens record mundane details: 29 jars of oil, 126 sheep, and 412 measures of barley. Similar utilitarian records appear in early Chinese oracle bones and Egyptian hieroglyphs. While we romanticize writing as a tool for creativity, its original purpose was far more practical, an administrative technology for tracking resources. This seemingly boring innovation transformed human existence. Before writing, even sophisticated pre-literate societies faced fundamental constraints on size and stability. Cognitive anthropologists have established that human memory, even enhanced by oral traditions, cannot reliably track resources beyond certain thresholds. The archaeological evidence from Çatalhöyük in Turkey illustrates this limitation perfectly. This impressive pre-literate settlement reached approximately 10,000 inhabitants around 7000 BCE, but showed cyclical patterns of growth and collapse due to systematic food mismanagement. Not from lack of farming skill, but from inability to coordinate at scale without written records. Writing systems solved this crucial problem by creating resource visibility, much like modern inventory systems providing real-time stock levels. The clay tablets from Mesopotamian cities show sophisticated inventory management stretching across seasons, with calculations accounting for seed requirements, anticipated harvests, and population needs. When disaster struck, these societies had precise information about their reserves and could implement rationing with mathematical precision. The impact on human welfare was immediate. Excavations at Tel Brak in Syria revealed how writing coincided with dramatic decreases in nutritional stress. Human remains from pre-writing layers show significantly higher rates of stress markers in bones compared to post-writing layers, despite facing similar environmental challenges. The difference wasn't more abundant harvests, it was better management of existing resources. This pattern appears consistently across distant civilizations. Egypt's population stabilized remarkably after developing hieroglyphics around 3100 BCE. Precise Nile flood measurements recorded annually on the Palermo stone allowed administrators to predict food production and allocate resources accordingly. Similarly, early Chinese writing emerged alongside population centers that maintained stability through climate events that had previously triggered settlements to collapse. Writing enabled complex contractual arrangements that reduced resource conflicts. The Code of Uar-Nammu, inscribed around 2100 BCE, standardized weights, measures, and property boundaries, reducing disputes that frequently led to violence in pre-literate societies. Archaeological records show significant decreases in skeletal trauma from interpersonal violence following written legal codes. Additionally, writing created institutional memory transcending individual lifespans. The Nippur temple archives contained agricultural records spanning centuries, allowing administrators to recognize climate patterns and adapt accordingly. This long-term perspective prevented the knowledge loss that previously accompanied generational transitions. The demographic impact was profound. Models based on archaeological evidence suggest human population remained below 20 million for thousands of years before writing. Within just 2,000 years after writing emerged, that number quadrupled. This wasn't simply due to agricultural improvements. Many key farming innovations predated writing by millennia without triggering comparable growth. Perhaps most telling is how quickly writing spread when introduced to new regions, suggesting its immediate survival value was recognized. When Minoan Linear, a script reached mainland Greece, evidence shows rapid adoption specifically for resource management before cultural applications appeared. The relationship becomes even clearer when examining societies that lost writing. When the Mycenaean Linear B script disappeared during the Greek Dark Ages around 1100 BCE, archaeological evidence shows immediate population decline and settlement abandonment. Similar patterns occurred with Mayan writing collapse. During the severe drought striking North Africa around 2200 BCE, neighboring non-literate societies experienced near-complete collapse. In contrast, Egyptian society, despite serious strain, maintained continuity through this crisis. Their administrative papyri show systematic reallocation of resources, tax adjustments, and coordinated labor movements, all made possible by written records providing complete resource visibility. This pattern repeated across centuries and continents. Societies with writing systems consistently showed greater resilience to environmental challenges than their non-literate counterparts. The ancestral Puebloan civilization in North America, lacking writing, abandoned massive settlements during extended droughts, while Chinese dynasties with sophisticated record-keeping survived comparable climate events through complex resource redistribution systems documented in their administrative archives. Knowledge across generations. Yet writing constituted only half the solution to humanity's vulnerability. Across the vast majority of human societies throughout history, not a single written record ever existed. These cultures still managed to preserve crucial information for centuries, often with remarkable precision that rivaled or exceeded written documentation. Consider what happens to knowledge when it lives exclusively in human minds. Each time an elder dies, their lifetime of accumulated wisdom potentially vanishes. This created a fundamental vulnerability for our species, one that could have repeatedly sent communities back to square one after each generation. Without methods to transmit accumulated knowledge, every human group would be forced to rediscover which mushrooms were poisonous, which weather patterns signaled danger, and which conflict resolution strategies prevented warfare. Anthropologists studying knowledge transmission have discovered that non-literate societies developed sophisticated memory systems. The Australian Aboriginal songlines encode precise geographic information about water sources, seasonal food availability, and terrain features across thousands of square miles. These songlines maintain accuracy over thousands of years, with researchers confirming landscape features described in songs that match geological changes occurring over 10,000 years ago. The reliability of these memory systems is remarkable. The Polynesian voyagers navigated the vast Pacific Ocean using star maps, current patterns, and bird migration routes memorized through specialized chants. When modern researchers tested these navigation methods against GPS, they found the traditional techniques accurate to within a few miles, even after crossing thousands of miles of open ocean. Epic poems served as cultural encyclopedias. The Iliad and Odyssey contain navigational instructions for Mediterranean seafaring, diplomatic protocols for interactions between city-states, and detailed descriptions of wound treatment. Analysis of Homeric texts reveals that geographical descriptions match actual Mediterranean coastal features with remarkable precision, essentially functioning as oral maps memorized by generations of poets. These were highly structured memory systems with built-in error correction. The Vedic texts of ancient India maintained perfect transmission accuracy through elaborate recitation techniques. Vedic priests learned to recite texts forward, backward, and in various patterns that mathematically verified content integrity. When scholars compared Vedic texts memorized by geographically separated communities that had no contact for over 1,000 years, they found virtually identical versions, a level of precision that rivals modern digital error correction. Like a modern data center with multiple backup systems, ancient cultures developed redundancy through rhythmic patterns, rhymes, and melodies. The West African griots memorized genealogies stretching back dozens of generations, preserving not just names but property rights, marriage alliances, and conflict resolutions critical for community stability. When colonial records later verified these oral histories, they confirmed their historical accuracy spanning hundreds of years. These systems preserved highly technical information. The Calauea healers of Bolivia maintained an oral pharmacopoeia of over 900 medicinal plants, including precise dosages and preparation methods. Recent pharmacological analysis has verified the efficacy of these traditional remedies, many containing active compounds that modern medicine has only recently identified. The cost of losing these knowledge systems proved catastrophic for many societies. When European colonization disrupted traditional knowledge transmission among indigenous Arctic peoples, communities lost critical information about weather prediction, ice safety, and navigation. This knowledge gap directly contributed to increased mortality rates from environmental accidents. Similar patterns appeared in Australian Aboriginal communities where disrupted initiation ceremonies broke the chain of ecological knowledge, leading to resource management failures. The Rapa Nui of Easter Island present another cautionary example. Archaeological evidence suggests that internal conflict disrupted their knowledge transmission systems, particularly regarding sustainable resource management. The resulting ecological collapse demonstrates how quickly a society can unravel when its collective memory fails. Interestingly, many written civilizations recognized the vulnerabilities of relying solely on documents and maintained parallel oral traditions. Ancient Egyptian scribes continued memorizing texts even after writing them down, a practice that proved prescient when the Library of Alexandria burned. Similarly, Buddhist monasteries in Tibet transcribed texts but continued their memorization traditions, which preserved countless works when monasteries were destroyed during the Cultural Revolution. Some knowledge systems combined oral and tangible elements. The Inca quipu, knotted cord devices, served as memory aids for trained specialists who could read demographic data, tax records, and historical narratives from the patterns. This hybrid system allowed for both physical records and the flexibility of oral interpretation. When Spanish conquistadors destroyed the quipus, they effectively erased centuries of accumulated knowledge. The effectiveness of these memory systems offers insights into human cognitive potential. Cognitive scientists studying contemporary memory champions have documented similar techniques to those used by indigenous knowledge keepers. These aren't mystical abilities but systematic methods for optimizing human memory, techniques largely abandoned in societies that outsourced memory to external storage. Today, as we face unprecedented global challenges like climate change and pandemic preparation, these ancient memory systems offer valuable lessons. They demonstrate that resilient knowledge systems require redundancy, multiple storage methods, and transmission channels. They also show that embedding critical information in emotional, narrative, or artistic forms significantly enhances its memorability and cultural persistence. Modern disaster preparation experts have begun incorporating these insights, developing memorable guidelines for emergency response that use rhythm, narrative, and visual association. Similarly, nuclear waste storage facilities face the challenge of warning future civilizations thousands of years hence, a problem strikingly similar to that solved by ancient memory keepers. Current proposals include creating nuclear priesthoods to maintain warning knowledge through ritualized transmission, essentially reinventing the same solutions our ancestors developed. These ancient memory systems remind us that human cognitive abilities exceed what most modern people utilize. The average memory palace practitioner today can memorize thousands of random digits in order, a feat that was once commonplace among knowledge keepers in non-literate societies. The symbolic advantage. The symbolic revolution that separated Homo sapiens from our evolutionary cousins was more consequential than we've long believed. When multiple human species walked Earth simultaneously, we weren't the obvious candidates for evolutionary success. Neanderthals possessed physical advantages that should have given them the edge in the brutal competition for survival. Archaeological evidence reveals that Neanderthals had approximately 10% larger brain cases than Homo sapiens, with particularly well-developed occipital lobes that enhanced visual processing and spatial awareness. Their robust frames featured barrel-shaped chests with larger lung capacity, providing better oxygen utilization in cold environments. Skeletal analysis shows they possessed significantly greater upper body strength. A Neanderthal adolescent would likely overpower a modern adult human in physical contests. For hundreds of thousands of years, these advantages served Neanderthals well. They hunted large game including woolly rhinoceros and mammoth, fashioned sophisticated stone tools, controlled fire, built shelters, and even buried their dead. Analysis of their dental calculus reveals they used medicinal plants and may have self-medicated with pain-relieving compounds from poplar trees. They were intelligent, technologically capable, and physically superior. Yet despite these advantages, Neanderthals vanished while our ancestors thrived. This evolutionary puzzle becomes even more striking considering Neanderthals had successfully adapted to European conditions for over 300,000 years before Homo sapiens arrived from Africa. They had survived multiple ice ages and interglacial periods through remarkable adaptations. The evidence points to a cognitive advantage that Homo sapiens possessed, a qualitative difference in how our species processed and communicated information. This difference is visible in the archaeological record through the explosion of symbolic artifacts associated with early Homo sapiens populations. At Fiumane Cave in Italy, archaeologists discovered perforated seashells dating to 47,000 years ago that show where patterns indicating they were strung together as beads. The shells originated from coastlines over 100 kilometers away, demonstrating both long-distance trade networks and the importance of symbolic display. Similar ornaments appear across Homo sapiens sites throughout Africa, Europe and Asia during this period, yet remain exceptionally rare at Neanderthal sites. The contrast becomes clearer in figurative art. The Lion Man statue discovered in Germany's Hohenstein-Stadel cave, a sculpture combining human and animal features, dates to approximately 40,000 years ago and represents something revolutionary: the capacity to imagine and depict things that don't exist in the natural world. This ability to create and communicate fictional concepts appears uniquely associated with Homo sapiens communities. Comparative analysis of Neanderthal material culture shows a striking pattern. While they produced sophisticated tools, evidence of symbolic expression remains minimal. The few examples of potential Neanderthal symbols, such as the etched lines found at Gorham's Cave in Gibraltar, lack the systematic patterning seen in Homo sapiens artifacts. When Neanderthals did adopt symbolic behaviors like creating personal ornaments, this typically occurred after contact with Homo sapiens populations, suggesting cultural borrowing rather than independent invention. Neanderthals possessed language-related genes similar to our own, but they didn't integrate symbolic thinking into their societies with the same transformative effects. Symbolic communication fundamentally restructured how our ancestors navigated environmental challenges. Isotope analysis reveals Neanderthal individuals typically spent their entire lives within a radius of 20 to 30 kilometers, with minimal evidence of long-distance migration or resource exchange. In contrast, Homo sapiens sites frequently contain materials from hundreds of kilometers away: amber, shells, and distinctive stone types that traveled through extensive trading networks. These networks were crucial during environmental crises. When a volcanic eruption devastated Central Europe around 40,000 years ago, covering vast areas in ash, Homo sapiens populations maintained connections across significant distances. Sites from this period contain materials originating from outside the affected zones, indicating that surviving groups shared resources with those in devastated regions. Neanderthal populations show evidence of repeated localized extinctions during similar crises. Without extensive social networks that could provide assistance or information about alternative resources, each Neanderthal group faced environmental challenges alone. When local conditions became unsurvivable, there were few options for assistance. The symbolic revolution also manifested across time. Homo sapiens developed sophisticated ways to store information across generations. The cave paintings at sites like Lascaux and Chauvet encode detailed information about animal behavior, seasonal patterns, and environmental knowledge. The consistent use of these sites over thousands of years suggests they functioned as information repositories, accessible to multiple generations. These painted caves served as memory banks where knowledge could be stored and retrieved across centuries, like bridges spanning the otherwise impassable chasms of time. While each Neanderthal community existed as an isolated island of knowledge that disappeared when its members died, Homo sapiens built an interconnected archipelago of information that survived even when individual groups perished. Simple geometric patterns might encode entire landscapes with resources and dangers, serving as memory aids for transmitting complex knowledge. These systems allowed Homo sapiens to preserve critical survival information across hundreds of generations, creating an unprecedented advantage. This capacity for symbolic thought transformed how our ancestors organized socially. Symbolic systems like totems, kinship classifications, and shared mythologies allowed groups to recognize and cooperate with unrelated individuals who shared their symbolic system. This symbolic tribalism enabled Homo sapiens to form flexible, extensive alliances that transcended immediate family groups. Perhaps most significantly, symbolic communication allowed Homo sapiens to coordinate group actions at unprecedented scales. Rock art depicting communal hunts with dozens of participants illustrates sophisticated cooperative strategies requiring precise planning, exactly the kind of complex social orchestration that symbolic communication facilitates. Genetic evidence tells us that Neanderthals didn't simply disappear. They interbred with Homo sapiens, contributing approximately 1 to 4% of the genome of non-African humans today. But as a distinct population, they vanished, while Homo sapiens expanded across virtually every environment on Earth. The decisive factor wasn't physical strength or raw intelligence, but rather the capacity to build collective intelligence through symbolic systems that connected individuals across both space and time. Climate survivors. Earth's climate has rarely been stable. Throughout the last 100,000 years, our planet has oscillated between extreme environmental conditions that have repeatedly threatened human existence. While countless species vanished forever when their habitats transformed, humans persisted and thrived, expanding across virtually every environment on Earth. This remarkable survival story wasn't achieved through biological adaptation. Unlike the thick fur of Arctic mammals or the specialized lungs of high-altitude birds, human bodies remained largely unchanged. Our skin provides minimal insulation against cold, we lack natural protection against intense UV radiation, and our lungs function poorly at high elevations without acclimatization. Physiologically speaking, we should have been confined to a narrow band of moderate climates. Yet the archaeological record tells a different story. At the height of the last glacial maximum, when vast ice sheets covered much of the northern hemisphere, humans were hunting on the frigid mammoth steppe of Central Europe. As the world warmed and then cooled again during the Younger Dryas period, human communities adapted and persisted. When dramatic sea level changes transformed coastal environments, human settlements adjusted accordingly. The Younger Dryas cooling event around 12,900 years ago showcases human resilience at its finest. In less than a decade, global temperatures plummeted by approximately 7 to 8 degrees Celsius, transforming temperate environments into near-Arctic conditions. Forests died. Tundra vegetation took over. Many large mammals that had survived previous climate fluctuations vanished during this abrupt shift. Human communities, however, developed strategies that allowed them to weather this climate catastrophe. Archaeological sites reveal sophisticated adaptations, informational rather than biological changes. Excavations at Gonnersdorf in Germany show that hunter-gatherer groups rapidly shifted their hunting strategies from forest species to reindeer and Arctic hares as the climate changed. Similar adaptations appeared simultaneously across widely separated human communities. This synchronized response emerged through extensive trade networks connecting human groups across hundreds of miles. Mediterranean shell beads found in Central Europe, Baltic amber appearing in settlements near the Black Sea, and obsidian tools transported across vast distances all point to a crucial fact. These networks served as information superhighways. When climate affected one region, knowledge about successful adaptation strategies spread rapidly through these established connections. Human groups functioned as distributed environmental sensors, collectively monitoring changing conditions and sharing successful responses. During the terminal Pleistocene period between 15,000 to 10,000 years ago, sea levels rose approximately 120 meters. This wasn't a gradual change. Meltwater pulses could inundate vast coastal areas within a single generation. Yet coastal communities worldwide executed coordinated relocations in response. The archaeological record tells a gripping tale of human foresight. Along the eastern Mediterranean, excavations reveal sequential settlement establishment as populations moved inland ahead of rising waters. These weren't panic-driven evacuations, but planned relocations that preserved social structures and technological knowledge. In Southeast Asia, researchers discovered phased abandonment of coastal settlements and establishment of new communities at higher elevations. Humanity moved like a symphony of survival. Notes played individually, but creating a harmonious response to environmental change. These coordinated movements required more than observing immediate environmental shifts. They demanded communication of environmental trends across generations. A shoreline rising a few centimeters annually might seem insignificant within one lifetime, but communities maintaining transgenerational records could anticipate relocation needs before crisis struck. Indigenous knowledge systems worldwide encoded precisely this climate information. The Kogi people of Colombia maintained astronomical observations linked to agricultural schedules tracking climate patterns over centuries. Their traditional calendars contained accurate information about El Niño cycles affecting regional rainfall, information invisible without generations of systematic observation. The Inuit developed an intricate vocabulary for sea ice types, each term containing embedded information about formation patterns, stability, and associated weather conditions. This knowledge allowed them to predict dangerous conditions and adapt hunting strategies. When documented in the 1990s, researchers discovered it contained information about climate patterns that instrumental records had only recently detected. Archaeological evidence from the North American Southwest demonstrates how communication networks helped populations survive severe drought conditions between 9001-300 CE. Communities maintained connections facilitating resource sharing and eventually coordinated migrations to areas with reliable water sources. Excavations at Choco Canyon revealed an extensive road network connecting outlying communities with central settlements, infrastructure enabling information exchange during climate crises. The development of writing systems dramatically enhanced climate resilience. Ancient Egyptian records documented Nile flood levels, creating a database allowing communities to prepare for both drought and flood conditions. Similar record-keeping emerged independently in ancient China, Mesopotamia, and Mesoamerica, all regions subject to climate variability. Even without formal writing, cultures developed methods to encode climate knowledge. Indigenous Australian songlines contain information about coastal flooding events from over 7,000 years ago. This knowledge survived through ritualized oral transmission for hundreds of generations, providing crucial survival information about flood-prone areas and safe havens during extreme weather. This communication-based climate resilience operated at continental scales. Evidence from the Upper Paleolithic period shows human populations tracking climate zone shifts with remarkable precision. Unlike other animals migrating blindly or perishing when conditions changed, human groups moved with apparent foreknowledge of where to find favorable conditions. This systematic response to climate change appears across Africa, Europe, and Asia, continents where no single individual could possibly have comprehensive environmental knowledge. Only through distributed information networks could such coordinated adaptations occur. Throughout history, our greatest asset in facing climate challenges hasn't been our physical bodies, but our unique ability to share, store, and utilize collective knowledge across vast distances. These ancient information networks were just the beginning of humanity's most effective survival strategy. When faced with supervolcanoes, pandemics, and asteroid impacts, the statistical odds of human survival should be remarkably low. Yet here we are. What explains this improbable persistence against catastrophic threats that have eliminated countless other species? Mathematically speaking, our continued existence defies probability. Survival analysis models indicate that a species facing the frequency and magnitude of threats humans have encountered should have disappeared long ago. Yet humanity has weathered each storm. This statistical anomaly reveals a systematic advantage that repeatedly tips the scales in our favor when disaster strikes. This advantage becomes clear when comparing historical societies with different information capabilities during shared catastrophes. The evidence forms a consistent pattern. Information-rich societies survive at higher rates than information-poor ones facing identical threats. During the Justinian plague of the 6th century, Byzantine communities with established public health communication networks experienced mortality rates approximately 30% lower than regions lacking such systems. These networks spread crucial information about symptom recognition and isolation practices, creating protective pockets that preserved social continuity. Similar patterns emerged during the 1918 influenza pandemic. Cities implementing coordinated public information campaigns achieved dramatically different outcomes. Philadelphia, which downplayed the threat and proceeded with a massive parade, suffered over 12,000 deaths in 6 weeks. Meanwhile, St. Louis quickly implemented and communicated distancing measures, resulting in less than half the death rate. The critical difference was information distribution about preventative measures. This pattern extends beyond disease outbreaks. After Mount Tombora erupted in 1815, causing the year without a summer, agricultural communities connected to information networks about alternative cultivation methods experienced significantly less starvation than isolated regions. Well-connected areas rapidly implemented crop substitutions based on information about similar past events, while isolated communities maintained normal planting schedules with devastating results. The survival advantage of information systems is even more pronounced in modern times. The 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami killed over 230,000 people, yet the death toll would have been vastly higher without the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center's detection and communication. The limited alerts that circulated saved tens of thousands of lives in areas that received them. This tragedy prompted the development of the Indian Ocean Tsunami Warning System, which proved effective during subsequent events. When an 8.6 magnitude earthquake struck off Indonesia in 2012, evacuation information reached coastal communities within minutes. Despite the earthquake's power, casualties were minimal compared to 2004 because the information shield had strengthened. Weather forecasting systems now prevent approximately 20,000 weather-related deaths annually by providing advance warning of extreme events. Hurricane forecasting accuracy has improved dramatically, increasing evacuation lead time from hours to days since the 1970s, directly reducing casualties. Disease surveillance networks represent perhaps the most sophisticated manifestation of our protective information armor. The World Health Organization's Global Outbreak Alert and Response Network connects 250 technical institutions across 70 countries, detecting potential pandemics before they spread globally. This digital sentinel identifies approximately 200 disease outbreaks annually, most remaining unknown to the public because early intervention prevents their spread. The 2003 SARS outbreak demonstrates this guardian in action. Despite initial delays, International information sharing contained the outbreak to approximately 8,000 cases worldwide. Epidemiological models suggest that without this coordinated information response, SARS could have infected millions. The strengthening of these networks enabled faster responses to potential pandemic threats like H5N1 avian influenza and MERS. Near-Earth object monitoring programs provide another layer of this protective shield. The Catalina Sky Survey, Pan-STARRS, and other telescope networks have identified approximately 95% of potentially hazardous asteroids larger than 1 kilometer, objects capable of causing global catastrophes. In 2013, this network detected the Chelyabinsk meteor hours before impact, providing crucial warning time that prevented numerous casualties despite the damage. These examples reveal a fundamental truth. Our information systems create a protective buffer between humanity and extinction-level threats. This buffer grows more robust as our communication technologies evolve. From oral traditions preserving knowledge of cyclical disasters to written records documenting effective responses to electronic systems enabling real-time global coordination, each advancement strengthens our collective resilience. The cumulative effect resembles an invisible shield surrounding humanity, an information membrane that detects, analyzes, and responds to threats faster than they can overwhelm us. Across historical timescales, this shield has repeatedly prevented localized catastrophes from cascading into species-threatening events. This shield strengthens after each crisis it encounters. The cholera outbreaks of the 19th century improved urban disease surveillance. The 2004 tsunami generated comprehensive warning networks across vulnerable coastlines. The 2014 Ebola outbreak accelerated the development of the WHO's Emergency Operations Program. Each catastrophe enhances our protective systems. Human societies have unconsciously selected for better information systems throughout our history. Cultures with effective knowledge-sharing mechanisms survived at higher rates, reinforcing these practices through cultural evolution. Our information shield has grown increasingly sophisticated, transitioning from knowledge repositories to active detection networks. Modern extinction prevention strategies prioritize information flow over physical countermeasures. Even our approaches to long-term threats like climate change rely fundamentally on information systems, from carbon monitoring networks to international data-sharing agreements. Unlike most species, which evolved physical adaptations to specific threats, humans developed a meta-adaptation, information systems that can respond to novel threats without requiring genetic change. This approach provides unprecedented flexibility, allowing responses to threats our ancestors never encountered. The effectiveness of this strategy becomes clear when examining extinction patterns among other large-bodied mammals during periods of rapid environmental change. Species lacking complex information-sharing capabilities experienced extinction rates up to 30 times higher than humans during comparable climate transitions. Our information shield effectively dampens the selection pressure that would otherwise drive our extinction during catastrophic events. The future of survival. This remarkable information shield that has repeatedly saved our species now stands before challenges it wasn't designed to handle. When extinction risk experts analyze our current vulnerabilities, they consistently identify one critical weakness that, if unaddressed, could render all our technological progress meaningless against the unprecedented threats of the coming century. The existential threats humanity faces today are fundamentally different from those of our past. Climate change operates across decades and centuries, with complex feedback loops our brains didn't evolve to perceive. Engineered pandemics could spread globally within days through our interconnected travel networks. Artificial intelligence systems operate at processing speeds millions of times faster than human thought. These modern challenges expose the limitations of communication systems that evolved for small group survival in relatively stable environments. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Researchers at the Oxford Internet Institute documented how critical public health information became distorted as it moved through digital networks. Vital guidance about transmission prevention competed with misleading claims that received up to 8 times more engagement on major social platforms. This dynamic created dangerous information vacuums precisely when coordinated action was most needed. This vulnerability extends beyond singular events. The Millennium Alliance for Humanity and the Biosphere at Stanford University conducted scenario planning exercises modeling how various existential threats might unfold. In 76% of their simulations, communication system failure served as the critical vulnerability multiplier that transformed manageable crises into extinction-level events. The initial threat rarely proved fatal. Instead, the breakdown of collective sense-making prevented effective response. When the Future of Humanity Institute at Oxford University surveyed 284 experts on existential risk, they ranked information hazards and coordination failures as more dangerous than the direct impacts of climate change, nuclear weapons, or pandemic disease. As one researcher explained, the primary threat isn't that we lack technologies to address these challenges. It's that we lack the information systems needed to deploy them effectively when it matters most. Historical evidence supports this conclusion. Archaeological records from collapsed civilizations consistently show they maintained their physical infrastructure while their information systems deteriorated. The Late Bronze Age collapse around 1200 BCE saw technically advanced societies disintegrate not because they lost their metallurgical capabilities, but because their administrative and diplomatic communication networks fragmented under pressure from environmental changes and population movements. More recently, the Soviet Union maintained its industrial and military capabilities until its final days, but failed when its information systems couldn't accurately process economic and social realities. Its communication infrastructure privileged certain types of information while suppressing others, creating fatal blind spots that prevented adaptation to changing conditions. Can our information systems evolve quickly enough to meet today's unprecedented challenges? The Center for the Study of Existential Risk at Cambridge University has identified scalable cooperation as humanity's central adaptation challenge. Their research indicates that information systems must evolve to allow billions of people to coordinate responses to threats operating at planetary scales and across generational timespans. The Global Priorities Institute at Oxford has identified 3 critical features that next-generation information systems must possess: truth-tracking capability, error correction, and incentive alignment. Truth tracking ensures information accurately represents reality. Error correction allows systems to identify and fix mistakes. Incentive alignment ensures that contributing accurate information benefits both individuals and collective survival. Current systems fall short on all 3 counts. Social media algorithms optimize for engagement rather than accuracy. Scientific publishing faces replication crises in multiple fields. News media prioritizes immediate audience reaction over long-term informational value. Government communications often sacrifice transparency for political advantage. Promising experimental models are emerging to address these shortcomings. The Metaculus prediction platform has demonstrated that properly structured collective forecasting can outperform even expert judgment on complex questions. During the pandemic, their aggregate predictions of case numbers, vaccine development timelines, and variant emergence consistently outperformed official projections. The effective altruism community has developed red teaming protocols that systematically expose weaknesses in important ideas before they're implemented. By creating dedicated spaces for constructive criticism, these systems help identify potentially fatal flaws that might otherwise go undetected until crisis moments. Most ambitious are efforts to create what researchers call epistemic infrastructure, institutions that generate reliable knowledge as their primary function, independent of market or political pressures. These include verification systems that can operate at internet scale and speed, truth-tracking metrics that create accountability for information quality, and protocols that help populations identify manufactured controversy versus genuine scientific uncertainty. The Nuclear Threat Initiative recently conducted tabletop exercises simulating an engineered pandemic. In scenarios with fragmented information systems, even when effective medical countermeasures existed, death tolls reached catastrophic levels because those tools couldn't be deployed in coordinated fashion. When the same scenarios included robust information-sharing networks, death tolls decreased by over 70%. Similarly, climate adaptation modeling demonstrates that regions with higher quality information flows about environmental changes consistently outperform regions with superior physical infrastructure but poorer communication systems. The crucial factor isn't having climate-resistant buildings, but ensuring populations receive accurate, actionable information about when and how to use them. Perhaps most concerning are scenarios involving artificial intelligence. The Machine Intelligence Research Institute has identified value alignment as the central challenge in AI safety, ensuring systems pursue goals compatible with human flourishing. This challenge is fundamentally about communication. How do we articulate human values with sufficient precision that machines can understand and preserve them? Our ability to solve this problem may determine whether AI becomes humanity's greatest ally or its terminal threat. What makes these information failures so dangerous is that they can render our most powerful physical technologies useless or even harmful. We possess the agricultural capability to feed everyone on Earth, yet millions starve due to distribution failures rooted in information problems. We have vaccine technologies that could eradicate numerous diseases, yet preventable illnesses persist partly due to trust and communication breakdowns. In our ancestors' world, communication served primarily to coordinate small groups in immediate physical environments. Today, it must coordinate billions across planetary systems over extended time frames. Bridging this coordination gap may be humanity's defining challenge in the coming century. Looking back across the ages, we've witnessed how communication, not physical prowess, has repeatedly saved humanity from extinction. From ancient oral traditions preserving life-saving knowledge to complex warning networks protecting communities from disaster, our survival has hinged on our ability to share critical information. Today, as we confront climate change, emerging diseases, and technological risks, strengthening these communication systems remains vital. Societies that survive will accurately transmit warnings, coordinate responses, and preserve solutions across generations and borders. Our future depends on clearer signals, faster networks, and reliable information exchange, the invisible lifeline connecting our past wisdom to tomorrow's survival.